At the outset, I think it is nice to get back to physical events. It's been quite some time that we have spent our energies and focus behind webcams and computer screens. But I think, nevertheless, that has taught us a lot. That has kept the spirit going. That has also helped us to reinvent and revitalize our focus. So, today, well, I don't have any presentation, but I will definitely want to indulge with you in kind of deliberating and discussing 10 top priorities for educators as we get into 2022. I use the word get into 2022 because I'm fully aware that our schools and our campuses are still getting ready to completely operate in the new normal. I did this presentation some time ago in January of 2022, and some of you must have seen or heard this presentation earlier, but I am doing this in the larger interest of all our educators one other time. Before we get started, I want to first of all use this opportunity to thank LROC, to thank all of you for coming together to deliberate and to discuss various issues which are very pertinent to education and to our schools. When I was sitting there and going through the agenda for today, we have a power-packed day and we also have a lot of powerful topics and themes for discussions. Now, one thing which I have noticed in all these educational conferences is it's like an energy graph which kind of dwindles down towards the latter half of the day. Natural to any school's routine, right? Children come in with so much of energy, you see the buzz and the excitement in the morning, and then around lunchtime they are all hungry, so they are silent, understandable, and once they feed their hunger, that's when the real drama begins, where you try to keep them focused as teachers and educators and disciplinarians and mentors in the school, but children have their own way to escape. But today, we need to reverse the trend. I'm not saying that because my panel discussion is post-lunch. There are many more who are towards the end, but why am I saying this is it's very important for us to walk the talk, because if we start walking the talk, that is when the real impact begins to happen at the ground level in our schools. With that small intro and a brief, let me begin by talking about the 10 top priorities for educators in 2022. Well, the first one needs no prediction. It is always Abraham Maslow over Bloom, as we call it as A before B. Why? And why it is relevant today, more important than ever, is we all know the gap which has been created for students, children, especially when it comes to their socio-emotional learning. And I think all of us can speak at length about the need and importance of socio-emotional learning, so I'm not going to get into the depth of it, but the one point I want to make is when the pandemic began, we all knew that it's a crisis. In fact, management experts call it a blue swan event, right? And as we are still in the pandemic, it's still not become an endemic, but I have always maintained, and I'm sure some of my colleagues in the education fraternity have already agreed, that children have gone through a crisis within a crisis and different types of issues and challenges. One small example I want to quote here, a friend of mine had a newborn. Now, this was in the March of 2020 as the pandemic began. 2 years fast forward, you know those rituals when you have newborns, you have that naming ceremony, you have that welcoming and all that. Unfortunately, every of their function coincided with the first wave, the second wave and the third wave, and they had to call it off. Now that everything has opened, they said, okay, we don't know what to call this ceremony, but we'll just call it a get together, get people into the room, into the house, and have the celebration of the incoming of the newborn. to her shock, when everybody came and they started lifting the baby and trying to cuddle the baby, from that word go till each of the last persons walked out of the house, the baby did only one thing, which was yelling, screaming and crying. Now, if you look at the depth of it, why did it happen? It is not because it was hungry. It is not because nobody knew how to handle it. But the baby has not seen any other face other than that of the mother and the father. Now, a newborn is expressing its socio-emotional deficit in its own way. And children, we feel thankful that they can express, but let me also tell you here with caution that their expression can be many times misleading. So we need to take that extra step in understanding the real requirement of the socio-emotional. And that's why I say it is always Abraham Maslow before Bloom's. Priority number 2 is effectiveness and efficiency has actually lost its value in the last 2 years. Especially, and my favorite is effectiveness. You are unable to measure effectiveness. It has got disrupted. The definition of effectiveness is disrupted. So then, what is left for us, at least for the next year, is to focus on efficiency. As we are deciding on embarking newer methodologies, newer technologies, I think we need to focus more on efficiency. For example, we have blended, we have hybrid classrooms, we have got remote workplaces. We still do not know whether everybody in our teams can come into physical campuses. I'm not talking of those campuses which has the advantage of a spacious infrastructure. I'm talking about those campuses where you have limited physical infrastructure, but you still need to carry on the activities of your school almost on a regular basis. Then you need to come up with innovative ways of dividing the workforce and trying to get them to connect online and virtually. Now there, how will you drive for efficiency? How will you, because we come from a thought process and a workflow where we believe in meetings for every drop of the hat. We want people to be in our room, we want to meet them because we believe in feel, touch and physical sharing of spaces. But how will we push for efficiency? Well, I think that's going to be the second priority for pushing for efficiency in the new normal. Priority number 3, I heard and I also saw a part of the presentation and I did read through some of the material which was provided in the kits about physical literacy. Physical literacy is the priority number 3 for going forward in 2022, and for obvious reasons, the last 2 years has created a lot of gaps for children to move, for movement, and we need to bring them back. And please do not get frustrated. We may have to start from scratch. We may have to start from scratch. Like every other subject, like every other aspect of schooling, we may have to start from scratch, and I think that becomes the third priority. Priority number 4 is design thinking. I don't have to define what is design thinking, but if there is one time which is more pertinent and relevant for using the design thinking approach to solve our issues, it is now. It is today. Because what does design thinking involve? It involves focus, it involves attention, it involves understanding, it involves insight, and more importantly, it involves clarity from everybody involved. Which means we need to bring together the learner and the giver together with an approach of design thinking. We need to start taking ownership for solving our own issues. And I think if we dwell deeper into design thinking, we will be able to understand how can we come up with innovation of problem solving. Priority number 5, again all of us have clearly debated this on various webinars and sessions, which is filling the learning gaps. Filling the learning gaps. And we know that the learning gap has not happened only because of the physical closure of the schools. It has also happened because of 1, reduction in syllabus, 2, forgotten learning. So it's a layered approach. So one above the other has caused a greater amount of learning loss and learning gaps. And we need to come up with different mechanisms and methodologies in bridging the gap. And let me also tell you this, it might not happen in 2022. It will take a longer period than 2022. As we all know, each child learns and understands at his or her own pace. So we may have to be patient, but at the same time perseverant about bridging the learning gap. Priority number 6, and this is my favorite. Simple word, but very, very effective in management and especially for leaders like us. Inspect what you expect. You got to inspect what you expect. Maybe it means you may have to change the leadership style. Maybe you'll have to get used to those dashboards and then look at those parameters and keep focusing on it on a regular basis so that you get your results. Priority number 7 is retailing of knowledge delivery. All of us have heard about creating TLMs, teaching learning materials. We've also heard of MOOCs, massive online open courses. I think it's time that we create our own MOOCs. It's time that we don't worry about professionalism. Don't worry about the packaging of these digital lessons. Focus on creating pertinent, focused, and more importantly, what works in your system and keep them as your repository. And that is the best thing. You know, I always take this example. We all love stationery. Whether you are a kid or you are an adult, we all love. But there is one pen. There is one pen or one paper or one piece of stationery which is very personal to you. I think that's the example I'll give when it comes to TLM. There are n number of PowerPoints and templates and YouTube videos which are available on the internet, no doubt about it. But the one you created is always special. That, if you multiply by the number of people working in your ecosystem, that makes it magical. And children will see that it is their teacher's energy and their style flowing in those presentations, and there is a connect. And teacher also will have that extra energy to display that presentation in public and share it, because that's the magic of creation. So creating these retailing of knowledge sources is priority number 7. Priority number 8 is how much is too much? The real question of screen time. Well, screen time is like habits. You cannot remove them, you can definitely replace them. So children are definitely going to use screens, whether you like it or not. Parents cannot stop, schools cannot stop. But what we can do is, can we give them a reason to replace their other screen time with our screen time? Priority number 9 is the massive effect, mitigating the massive effect, which is basically the rich gets richer, poor gets poorer. So we all have heard of the gap that people with technology, people with access to tools are able to enjoy the gap or no gap in education, but people without access are not able to enjoy. So the point here is we need to do our bit. Maybe some schools, some institutions around you, not as a CSR, but we need to open up our labs, our libraries for them to get used to digital resources. Maybe the government and the other sectors will take time, but when we have it, we can share it with them. And last one, priority number 10 is examinations and assessments need to be relooked. Yes, NEP has spoken a lot. Pedagogical planning has spoken a lot. Is it assessment for learning? Is it assessment of learning? All of that, and we all know it. But I think we need to use the common sense approach. We need to use the common sense approach. When I say that, what I mean is, how would I like to be assessed for something new which I have learned? For example, you are new to WhatsApp. Let's consider that. If you are new to WhatsApp, can I prepare a question paper and say, do you know all the features of WhatsApp, and if you pass, you qualify to use WhatsApp? If you not, then you have to delete WhatsApp from your book or from your mobile. It's not that way, right? It's utilitarian. It's practical. It's application based. So I will not talk more about what can we do about assessments, but I will definitely end by saying the thought with which we approach assessments and examinations in our schools need to change, will change in 2022. So these are the top 10 priorities for educators in 2022. Thank you so much for your patient listening. And if those bells are an indication, they were for me to cut short. I am done. Thank you.